If I had stayed home that night, none of this would have happened. That thought still finds me sometimes, usually on quiet mornings, when the sunlight spills across the kitchen floor and the smell of fresh coffee drifts through the house. It found me again today. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Noah asked from across the room. He was leaning against the counter, wearing an old gray college sweatshirt that somehow looked better on him than it ever did on me. 28 years old, a little taller than when we first met, a little more confident, but still carrying the same easy smile that could unravel every thought in my head. I laughed softly and looked away. I was just remembering something. Noah raised an eyebrow. "Should I be worried?" "Probably," I said. He shook his head, smiling as he turned back to the coffee maker. And just like that, my mind drifted backward. Back to a gymnasium in a small Ohio town. Back to cheap decorations and bad music. Back to a night I almost never attended. When I was 16, I had mastered the art of disappearing in plain sight. I wasn't unpopular. I wasn't bullied. I wasn't even particularly lonely. I was simply the kind of person people forgot was standing in the room 5 minutes after leaving it. I spent lunch periods in the library, volunteered when teachers needed help, and somehow became known as dependable, which is a nice way of saying nobody had a more interesting word to describe you. The school dance was scheduled for a Friday night in late October. By 6 o'clock, I was standing in front of my bedroom mirror, staring at a navy button-down shirt my mom had ironed that afternoon. I hated everything about it. The shirt, the dance, the idea of spending 3 hours pretending to enjoy myself. "Adrian," my mother called from downstairs. "You're going." I groaned loud enough for the entire house to hear. "This feels legally questionable." "Nice try," she called back. 20 minutes later, I found myself walking into the school gym. The air smelled like fruit punch, floor wax, and way too much cologne. Strings of white lights hung from the basketball hoops. Student council had tried their best to make the place look magical. They had not succeeded. Music echoed from speakers that sounded older than most of the teachers. Couples posed for photos near a glitter-covered backdrop, while groups of friends laughed near the refreshment tables. I immediately wanted to leave. I grabbed a plastic cup of punch and positioned myself near the wall, where I could blend into the scenery. That was the plan anyway. Then a voice appeared beside me. "You look like a guy trying very hard to pretend he belongs here." I turned toward the sound. Brown hair, bright eyes, a crooked smile that looked completely effortless. For a second, I forgot what I was supposed to say. "I could say the same thing about you," I replied. The stranger grinned wider. "Good," he said. "That means neither of us has to fake it alone." And for reasons I still can't fully explain, I smiled back. "Good," he said. "That means neither of us has to fake it alone." I laughed before I could stop myself. "That might be the most dramatic thing anyone has said to me all week." "Only all week?" he asked, pressing a hand to his chest. "Wow, tough crowd." His grin widened. "I am Noah, by the way." He held out his hand like we were meeting in some old movie, instead of a high school gym decorated with discount streamers. I looked at his hand for half a second before shaking it. "Adrian." "Nice to meet you, Adrian." The strange thing was that it actually felt nice. Most conversations at school lasted 30 seconds before people drifted towards someone louder. Noah stayed. He leaned against the refreshment table and took a sip of the fruit punch. Immediately, his face twisted in horror. "That is the worst thing I have ever tasted. You have had a very fortunate life then." "No, seriously," he said. "It tastes like somebody dissolved a bag of gummy bears in sink water." I laughed again. "That is probably the recipe." "I knew it." He pointed at me. "You seem trustworthy." "That is a weird compliment. I have plenty of weird compliments." Noah shrugged. "For example, you look like the kind of person who actually reads the assigned books in English class." "I do. See? I am good at this." For the next few minutes, he asked questions faster than I could answer them. What classes did I like? What classes did I hate? Did I think our mascot looked more like a wildcat or a raccoon? Had I always lived here? Somehow none of it felt forced. It felt easy, dangerously easy. "So why are you standing over here by yourself?" Noah finally asked. I looked around the gym. The lights reflected across the polished floor. A slow song started playing and several people groaned dramatically. "Maybe I like observing people." Noah nodded thoughtfully. "That sounds like something a future novelist would say." "I am not a novelist. Not yet." "You say that like you know me." "I know enough." "Which is?" He smiled. "You notice things. Most people do not." I stared at him for a second. Nobody had ever said that to me before. Quiet, shy, reserved. I had heard all of those, but not that. Not like it was something good. "And what about you?" I asked. "What kind of person are you?" Noah pretended to think about it. "The kind who gets dragged to school events by friends and immediately starts looking for the nearest exit." "Then why are you still here?" He lifted his cup slightly. "Because I found something better than the exit." Before I could respond, a voice shouted from across the gym. "Noah!" A tall guy near the dance floor waved both arms. Are you ditching us again? Noah glanced over and sighed dramatically. Apparently I am being summoned. You should go. For a second I expected him to nod and leave. Instead he looked back at me. I have a better idea. That sounds dangerous. Probably. He smiled. Come meet my friends. Come meet my friends. Every reasonable instinct told me to say no. I had spent most of high school avoiding situations exactly like that. Large groups, new people, the possibility of awkward silence. Unfortunately, Noah was already walking backward through the crowd with an expression that suggested he fully expected me to follow. You realize this could be a trap, I called after him. Too late, he said. You already accepted the quest. The quest? Every hero needs one. I shook my head, but somehow I was smiling as I followed him across the gym. His friends were gathered near the edge of the dance floor. The tall guy who had shouted earlier pointed at Noah the second we arrived. There he is. We thought you got abducted. I found someone more interesting than all of you, Noah replied, which was not difficult. The group immediately protested. Rude. Unbelievable. You say that every week. Noah ignored them and gestured toward me. This is Adrian. To my surprise, nobody looked annoyed that I had appeared out of nowhere. A girl with curly blonde hair smiled first. Hi, Adrian. I am Emma. Another guy raised his cup. Ryan. A third waved. Mason. The introductions continued, and before I knew it, people were talking to me like I had been standing there all evening. Noah slipped naturally into every conversation, somehow making everyone laugh without trying too hard. At one point, Ryan glanced between us and said, "So how do you two know each other?" Noah answered before I could, "About 20 minutes. Ryan blinked. "Seriously? We bonded over terrible fruit punch." "That is beautiful," Emma said solemnly. "A friendship for the ages." For the next hour, something strange happened. I stopped checking the clock. Usually at school events, I counted minutes. That night, they disappeared. We joked about teachers, argued over which cafeteria food was the worst, and listened to Noah passionately explain why our school mascot was definitely a raccoon, pretending to be a wildcat. "Look at the eyes," he insisted. "Those are raccoon eyes. You have spent too much time thinking about this," I said. "Not enough time," he replied. The music shifted to a slower song. Groans echoed across the gym. Noah immediately leaned toward me. "If anyone asks me to dance, tell them I recently joined a monastery." I laughed. "That is not how monasteries work. You know that. I know that. The average person does not know that. I am pretty sure they do. You are crushing my confidence, Adrian." It was such a simple conversation, but I remember every second of it. Maybe because nobody had made being myself feel so effortless before. Maybe because Noah looked directly at people when they spoke, like he genuinely cared about the answer. Or maybe because for the first time in a long time, I did not feel invisible. Near the end of the night, as students started gathering their jackets and saying goodbye, Noah pulled his phone from his pocket. "This might sound crazy," he said, "considering we met less than 2 hours ago." "Exactly." He held out his phone. "Can I get your number?" My heart did a strange little flip. "Sure." Noah handed me the phone with a grin. "Good." I was hoping this would not be the last conversation. The first text arrived before I even got home. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, halfway through taking off my dress shoes, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Be honest. On a scale from 1 to 10, how terrible was my mascot theory? I stared at the message for a second before laughing. Me, 11. There was no pause. Noah, wow. I opened my heart, and this is how you treat me. That should have been the end of it. Instead, we texted for almost 2 hours. Then the next day. Then the day after that. Somehow Noah became part of my routine so quickly that I barely noticed it happening. Every morning there was a message waiting for me. Every evening there was another conversation. Some were serious. Most were ridiculous. One Tuesday he texted me a blurry picture of a cafeteria pizza slice. "Noah, do you think this is legally food?" Me, "I think it lost that battle years ago." "Noah, thank you. I needed a second opinion." A few weeks, seeing Noah in the hallway became the best part of my day. He always spotted me first. I would be walking toward class when I would hear my name from somewhere across the crowd. "Adrian." Then Noah would appear beside me like he had materialized out of thin air. "Good morning," he would say dramatically. "I survived algebra. Congratulations. Thank you." It was touch and go there for a while. It felt strange how easy everything became around him. At lunch, he would wave me over to his table. After school, we sometimes sat outside the library talking until the parking lot started emptying. When winter arrived and cold winds swept through town, we spent afternoons inside the library, pretending to study while actually discussing everything except homework. "What do you want to do after graduation?" Noah asked one afternoon. Snow drifted beyond the windows. The library felt warm and quiet. I looked down at the open textbook in front of me. "I do not know. That is not true." "It is." Noah shook his head. "Everybody wants something." "Okay," I thought for a second. "I want to write." See, he said immediately. I knew it. You knew nothing. I literally called it the first night. You made a random guess. A correct random guess. I rolled my eyes. Noah grinned like he had won an important argument. Moments like that started piling up. Small moments. Meaningless moments. The kind you never expect to remember. Sharing fries after school. Walking through the halls together. Arguing over movies. Watching Noah fail spectacularly at opening a stubborn locker. This thing hates me. The locker? No fate. One Friday afternoon, we were leaving school when a cold gust of wind hit us. I shoved my hands into my jacket pockets. Noah looked at me for a second. Then he pulled off one glove and handed it over. Take it, then your hand will freeze. I have another one. That is not how gloves work. Trust me, I am an expert. I laughed but took it anyway. For some reason, that simple gesture stayed with me all evening. Months earlier, I had been somebody who moved quietly through the edges of life. Now every day seemed brighter. Every hallway seemed shorter. Every ordinary moment felt a little less ordinary. And the strangest part was that I still thought what I felt was friendship. Nothing more. Nothing complicated. At least that was what I kept telling myself. The problem with falling for someone is that there is never a single moment when it happens. At least not for me. There was no lightning strike. No dramatic realization. Just hundreds of small moments piling on top of each other until pretending became impossible. It started with the little things. The way Noah always looked for me in a crowded hallway. The way he remembered details nobody else noticed. The way a bad day somehow felt manageable after spending 10 minutes talking to him. One Friday afternoon, I was sitting in the library pretending to study when Noah dropped into the chair across from me. "Emergency," he announced. "What happened?" "I got an 82 on a chemistry test." I blinked. "That is an emergency?" "For me, yes." "You are ridiculous." "I know." He smiled. "That is one of my best qualities." I tried not to laugh and failed immediately. Noah pointed at me. "There it is." "What?" "That smile." "What smile?" "The one you do when you are trying not to laugh." I looked back down at my book before he could see my face getting warm. The worst part was how happy moments like that made me. Weeks passed. Spring arrived. Snow disappeared from sidewalks. Trees started turning green again. Everything around me seemed brighter, which would have been nice if my brain had not decided to make every interaction with Noah significantly more complicated. One afternoon, we were walking home after school when Noah nudged my shoulder. "You know what your problem is?" "I am afraid to ask." "You spend too much time thinking." "That is not a problem." "It absolutely is," says the guy who tried microwaving aluminum foil. One time. One time was enough. Noah laughed so hard he nearly dropped his backpack. I remember watching him and thinking something I immediately wished I had not thought. If somebody else gets to be the person he ends up with someday, they are going to be incredibly lucky. The realization hit harder than I expected. That was not how people thought about ordinary friendships. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly overhead. Every memory seemed different now. The dance, the library, the texts, the milkshakes, the afternoons that somehow felt too short no matter how long they lasted. Somewhere around midnight, I finally admitted the truth. I liked Noah, really liked him. The realization should have felt exciting. Instead, it terrified me. Because Noah was not just someone I liked. He was my best friend. If I said the wrong thing, I could lose everything. The next week became an exercise in pretending. Pretending my heart did not speed up whenever his name appeared on my phone. Pretending I was not disappointed whenever plans got canceled. Pretending every smile meant the same thing it always had. Then Blake Donovan entered the picture. Everybody knew Blake. Student council president, debate champion. The kind of guy who could walk into any room and immediately own it. At first, I barely paid attention to him. Then one afternoon, I walked into the cafeteria and noticed Blake sitting beside Noah. They were talking about something, and both of them looked completely absorbed in the conversation. For reasons I could not explain, an uncomfortable feeling settled in my stomach. "You are staring," Emma said from across the table. "I am not." "You absolutely are." She followed my gaze and smiled knowingly. "Relax. They are working on student council stuff." Maybe she was right. Maybe it meant nothing. But as I watched Blake make Noah laugh from across the room, a feeling I had never experienced before quietly appeared. Jealousy. Blake Donovan had the kind of confidence that made people pay attention, even when he was not speaking. He was smart, popular, and somehow involved in nearly everything that happened at school. At first, I barely noticed him. Then one afternoon, I walked into the cafeteria and saw him sitting across from Noah, laughing at something Noah had said. For reasons I could not explain, the sight bothered me more than it should have. "You are staring," Emma said. I nearly dropped my tray. "I am not." "You absolutely are." She glanced toward Noah and Blake. "Relax. They are working on student council stuff." I nodded, but the uneasy feeling stayed. A few days later, I was leaving English class when Blake appeared beside me. "You are Adrian, right?" he asked. "Yeah, Noah talks about you a lot." The comment caught me off guard. "He does?" Blake smiled. "Used to, anyway." Before I could ask what that meant, he walked away. That should have been my first warning. The comments continued after that. Never enough to start an argument. Never obvious enough to call out. Just small observations dropped into conversation like pebbles into a lake. "Funny," Blake said one afternoon while we waited outside class. "I thought Noah would be here with you." "Why?" "No reason," he shrugged. "He has been spending a lot of time with someone lately." When I asked who, Blake simply smiled and changed the subject. The uncertainty did the rest. A week later, Noah texted me asking if I wanted to get milkshakes after school. I agreed immediately. It was exactly the kind of thing we always did. Then, 30 minutes before we were supposed to meet, another message arrived. "Sorry, something came up. Rain check?" I stared at the screen longer than I should have. The disappointment felt embarrassingly sharp. The next day, Blake found me in the hallway. "Rough afternoon yesterday?" he asked. I frowned. "What are you talking about?" "Nothing." He looked almost amused. "I just ran into Noah downtown later." My stomach tightened. "Oh." Blake nodded thoughtfully. He seemed pretty happy. Then he walked away before I could ask anything else. That night, I barely slept. Every insecure thought I had spent months ignoring suddenly felt louder. Maybe Noah had met somebody. Maybe I had imagined all those moments between us. Maybe I was the only one who thought they meant something. The worst moment happened near the end of April. School had just ended. I was heading toward the parking lot when I spotted Noah, standing near the front entrance. Relief appeared instantly. Then I noticed Blake beside him. The two of them were talking. Noah laughed at something Blake said. A second later, Blake handed him a folded note. Noah looked at it, smiled, and slipped it into his backpack. Neither of them saw me. The scene lasted less than 10 seconds. Somehow it replayed in my head for days. That evening, Noah texted me. Then he texted again and again. I looked at every message without replying. Across town, Noah had no idea that Blake's folded note was nothing more than a student council schedule for graduation planning. But I did not know that. All I knew was that every fear I had been carrying suddenly felt real, and for the first time since the night we met, I chose distance instead of trust. Ignoring Noah turned out to be much harder than I expected. The first day, I told myself I just needed space. The second day, I convinced myself it was the smart thing to do. By the end of the week, I was miserable. Every part of my routine felt wrong. Lunch felt quieter. The library felt emptier. Even my phone seemed heavier somehow. Noah kept trying. That was the worst part. He texted, he called, he stopped by my locker. "Did I do something?" he asked one afternoon after catching me outside chemistry class. I tightened my grip on my backpack strap. "No, Adrian." He frowned. That was the least believable answer I have ever heard. I forced a shrug. "Everything is fine." "No, it is not." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Students flowed around us in both directions. Lockers slammed. Conversations echoed through the hallway. Noah lowered his voice. "Talk to me." I wanted to. God, I wanted to. Instead, I looked away. "I have to get to class." The hurt that flashed across his face stayed with me all day. Things only got worse after that. We stopped sitting together at lunch. The daily messages disappeared. The easy conversations vanished. Weeks earlier, it felt impossible to imagine a day without Noah. Now we were somehow becoming strangers again. One afternoon, Emma cornered me outside the library. "Okay," she said. "What happened?" "Nothing happened." "You are a terrible liar." I sighed. "Emma, no." She crossed her arms. "You and Noah have barely spoken for 2 weeks. He looks miserable. You look miserable. Everybody is miserable." That feels dramatic. I learned from Noah. Despite myself, I almost smiled. Emma noticed immediately. "There it is." "What?" "The smile you only do when somebody mentions him." My chest tightened. "You are imagining things." Emma stared at me for a long second. Then her expression softened. "Adrian." I looked away. "I cannot talk about it." She did not push further, but the disappointment in her eyes followed me home. Graduation approached faster than I expected. The final weeks of senior year arrived wrapped in warm weather and countdowns. Everybody talked about college plans and future apartments and moving away. I spent most of my time avoiding Noah. It was exhausting. The night of graduation arrived clear and warm. Families filled the football field. Folding chairs stretched across the grass beneath stadium lights. Students laughed and took pictures. Everyone seemed excited except me. After the ceremony ended, people scattered across the field, searching for friends and relatives. I was heading toward the parking lot when I heard someone call my name. "Adrian." I froze. Noah stood a few yards away. For the first time in weeks, neither of us had anywhere else to be. "Can we talk?" he asked. I should have said no. Instead, I nodded. We walked toward the empty bleachers overlooking the field. Noah stopped halfway up the steps and turned toward me. The easy confidence I had always associated with him was gone. Why are you doing this? He asked quietly. Doing what? Leaving. The single word hit harder than I expected. Noah took a slow breath. I have spent months trying to figure out what happened. He looked directly at me. And I still do not know why you pushed me away. For a few seconds I could not answer. The stadium lights cast long shadows across the empty bleachers. Somewhere in the distance families were still celebrating. But up there it felt like the rest of the world had disappeared. Noah waited. He did not interrupt. He just stood there looking at me with the same patience he had shown from the very beginning. Finally, I looked down at my hands. I thought you liked someone else. Noah blinked. What? I thought you liked someone else. The words sounded ridiculous the moment they left my mouth. Blake kept saying things. Then I saw you two together all the time. I saw him give you notes. I saw you cancel plans. I exhaled slowly. I thought I understood what was happening. For a moment, Noah stared at me in complete disbelief. Then he covered his face with one hand. You have got to be kidding me. I wish I was. Noah actually laughed. Not because it was funny. More because he could not believe it. Adrian, those notes were for a graduation committee project. Oh, and the day I canceled on you, I was buying something. Buying what? Noah looked at me for a second before shaking his head. You know what? Never mind. The silence stretched between us. My chest felt impossibly heavy. I am sorry, I said quietly. I should have talked to you. Yeah, Noah replied. You should have. He was not angry. Somehow that made it worse. I spent months thinking I did something wrong, he continued. I kept replaying every conversation in my head. I swallowed hard. I know. Do you? His voice softened. Because it really sucked, Adrian. The honesty in that sentence hit me harder than anything else. I looked away. I know. Another silence followed. Then Noah sighed. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why did it matter so much? I froze. There it was. The question I had been avoiding for months. The truth sat right there between us. Terrifying. Obvious. Impossible to hide anymore. Noah waited. Because I liked you, I finally said. The words came out barely above a whisper. What? I liked you. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. Not as a friend. I laughed nervously. Which is probably obvious now. Noah did not say anything. For one horrible second I thought I had destroyed everything. Then he looked away and laughed softly. Wow. That bad? No. He shook his head. Just the opposite. I stared at him. Noah looked back at me with an expression I had never seen before. Warm, relieved, almost amused. Adrian, he said gently, do you have any idea how long I have been waiting for you to say that? My brain completely stopped working. What? You heard me. Noah. I liked you too. The world seemed to tilt sideways. You did? For a long time, he smiled. Honestly, I was starting to think I imagined the whole thing. I laughed. Then he laughed. And somehow all the tension that had been building for months simply disappeared. We sat there talking until the stadium lights began shutting off one section at a time, talking about everything, the misunderstandings, the fear, the things we should have said sooner. And for the first time in months, neither of us felt lost anymore. The funny thing about life is that the moments you think will change everything rarely look dramatic when they happen. There were no fireworks, no grand speeches, no movie soundtrack playing in the background. There were just two teenagers sitting on cold metal bleachers, long after graduation ended, finally telling each other the truth. The months that followed felt lighter than anything that came before. Noah left for college 3 hours away. I stayed closer to home. Everybody warned us that distance changed people. Maybe it does. But somehow we kept finding our way back to each other. There were late-night phone calls that lasted until one of us fell asleep. Weekend drives, long messages about classes, professors, bad roommates, and future plans. Some conversations were important, most were not. You called me because your microwave exploded? I asked one evening. First of all, Noah replied, it did not explode. You literally said exploded. It made an alarming sound. You are impossible, and yet you answered. Years passed that way, slowly, quickly, both at once. We graduated college, found jobs, moved cities, built lives that looked very different from the ones we imagined at 16. Through all of it, Noah remained the person I wanted beside me, the person I called first, the person who made every unfamiliar place feel a little more like home. One summer evening, years later, we were walking through a neighborhood outside Columbus. The air smelled like freshly cut grass. Porch lights glowed along quiet streets. Noah stopped in front of a small white house with blue shutters. What do you think? He asked. About what? About living here. I stared at him, then at the house, then back at him. Are you serious? Noah smiled. Very. A few months later we moved in. The house was not perfect. The floors creaked. The kitchen was smaller than we wanted. The mailbox leaned slightly to one side. It was perfect anyway, because it was ours. Back in the present, Noah carried 2 coffee mugs toward the table and slid one in front of me. You disappeared again, he said. I know. Dangerous place to leave me alone with all these responsibilities. I laughed and accepted the mug. I was thinking, that explains it. About graduation? Noah asked. About before that. His expression softened immediately. The dance? The dance. He smiled the same smile that had caught me completely off guard all those years ago. Some things change, some things do not. You know, Noah said, leaning back in his chair, there is a version of reality where you stayed home that night. I know. Kind of weird to think about. I looked around the kitchen, the morning sunlight, the coffee, the life we built one ordinary day at a time. Then I looked back at him. Yeah, I said softly, but I am really glad that is not the version we got. Noah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Me too. And even now, after all these years, I still think that one small decision changed everything. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share it with friends who might enjoy it too. We would love to know where you are watching from. Tell us your city and country in the comments. More heartfelt and unforgettable LGBTQ stories are already waiting for you. See you in the next one.